Hi friends, and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, my name is Kailin and I post new videos almost every single week, and I post videos mainly about eating disorder recovery and intuitive eating. So if that's something that you're interested in, I would love for you to click onto that subscribe button down below and become part of our little family. But buckle up kiddos, because we are here for another Truth About series. And if you're new to my channel and you've never heard of this series, you're not that far behind, because this is the second installment. And in the Truth About series, we talk about popular diets as well as popular diet trends, and we tell the truth, okay? I'm not in it to make money. I'm just here to point out some BS from a lot of these dieting trends. And from the title, you can see that today we're going to be talking about one of my old enemies. We are going to be talking about intermittent fasting / fasting in general, but this video is mainly about this whole idea of intermittent fasting. But man, we've got like a big can of worms to open, so why don't we just dive right in. So first things first, what the heck is intermittent fasting? I'm sure many of you have heard of this before, and if you haven't, be thankful for that, because this is something that you want to stay quite far away from. Intermittent fasting is a super popular diet / way of eating. I think it's a lot more about a way of eating versus like what you eat. So it's not exactly categorized as a diet, but just as like a dieting tool. And intermittent fasting is actually practiced globally, all around the world, and it is one of the most popular dieting trends as of right now, but it's also maintained a lot of momentum over the past however many years. We'll get into it. So if intermittent fasting is not something that you are aware of, it's basically this way of eating where you go through periods where you have like an eating window where you have permission to eat, and then you have periods of time where you do not consume anything other than like water and black coffee, essentially. So most versions of intermittent fasting, as I mentioned, don't really specify what you should eat. I'm going to be using lots of air quotes in this video, but it specifies a lot more about like the timing of when you eat, and it stresses that importance versus the food. However, it's never that simple or that easy. The diet as well as the tech industry have started investing in fasting related food products. And the reason why there's a lot of funding or investing behind these products is sort of to facilitate or make it easier for the people who are currently participating in intermittent fasting. And I wouldn't be surprised if intermittent fasting started to turn into something different, and there was not only just a focus on time, but also like a focal point when it comes to food and like what foods you should be eating. So with that being said, just keep in mind that there still is some kind of financial gain to intermittent fasting, even though it's not directly related to like what kinds of foods you should be eating. There are apps, there are books, there's still a lot of room for profit. And within intermittent fasting, just so that we have like a very clear understanding of what it is, there are different fasting methods. So the first example of a fasting method is time restricted eating. So that means not eating for 16 hours of the day and eating for the other 8 hours. I had to check my math for a second. I was like, does 16 plus 8 equals 24? It does, but like math is not my strong suit, okay? Another form of intermittent fasting is alternate day fasting. Fuck, it scares me too. So when it comes to alternate fasting, it really depends on the source, but a lot of the sources say that on one day you can eat like less than 25% of the needs that you need that day, and then the next day you can eat 100% of your needs basically, and like you alternate back and forth. It's literally like the restrict binge cycle, because that is usually what ends up happening. If you restrict yourself and fast this way, as soon as you put a piece of food in your mouth, you're just gonna fucking lose it, try to eat so much, and enter like this feast mode, and that's a primitive response to restriction, but more on that later. And then one of the last forms of intermittent fasting that I'm going to be talking about in this video is whole day fasting, which is literally the stupidest shit that I've ever heard, but we're still going with it. But this is called the 5-2 diet as well. So there's 5 days of the week where you eat as you normally would, and then 2 days of the week where you don't eat at all. If that doesn't sound like an eating disorder, I don't know what does. Anywho, let's talk about some of the reasons why people begin intermittent fasting in the first place. and I guess the goals of intermittent fasting. The first thing that I want to say is that when it comes to dieting trends and diets, there is so much misinformation online. And it's honestly quite scary because when it comes to intermittent fasting, there are so many false claims. There's a lot of talk when it comes to intermittent fasting about cancer prevention and also about increasing or aiding the effects of chemotherapy. This is something that it's very dangerous territory, and it's dangerous territory because the science is truly not there. There is not enough accurate science to show that the link between intermittent fasting and cancer prevention or chemotherapy effectiveness, like those lines with human beings, have never been met. All of the research as of right now, one, we don't have enough of it, and two, it's only been done on lab rats. There's been no human connection. So to input ourselves in this kind of situation without knowing the long-term potential consequences of intermittent fasting or what it can do on our body is just, it's very scary. And it's also very unnecessary when it comes to health and our overall health and well-being. You don't have to fast to be healthy. In fact, you should probably not fast in order to maintain the most healthy environment for your body in the first place. I'm going to say something that not everyone will agree with, and that's okay. But intermittent fasting is a fad diet. That's what it is. And I understand that not everyone will agree with that statement, but you can paint it in a bunch of different colors, and in the end, it still does the same thing. Intermittent fasting is extremely popular. It's not backed by science. I just want to put that in again. It is not backed by science. And it also makes very unreasonable as well as unrealistic goals when it comes to weight loss and body composition. And the thing that I think unnerves me the most is just this emphasis on health and on cancer prevention and everything like that. Because yes, if there's something that could prevent cancer, a lot of people are going to flock to that idea or to this diet or whatever it might be. But again, we have no proof, we have no science. So all of these false claims are just dragging more people into this fasting world when again, they never had to be there in the first place. Anytime you hear about people or a company talking about like cancer prevention foods or cancer prevention dieting, I want some alarms to start blaring in that beautiful mind of yours, okay? Because no food in isolation, no diet in isolation is just going to prevent cancer, okay? Of course, prioritizing your health is an important thing, but health looks different to everybody. And the most important thing that you can do is look after yourself and your body's needs on a day-to-day basis. And something that your body needs every single day without failure is food. You need to eat every day. You need to drink water every day. You need to sleep every day. These are things that you need. But anyway, going back to what I was saying before, if anybody is saying that some diet prevents cancer, I think that we have to look beyond the person who is saying that and try to see if there's any sort of lucrative industry or corporation striving to make money off of people's health anxiety. Because so many people, myself included, have health anxiety, have death anxiety. But things like this, intermittent fasting, these false claims, they're not going to help anybody. Like many fad diets, there are several individuals, and usually individuals with no like medical background, who claim in like a very vague way that intermittent fasting has cured an illness of theirs or something like that. But none of this is rooted in actual science. Just because one person has an experience doesn't mean that it will be the same experience for everyone else. In fact, it's most likely going to be so different for each individual. And I know that kind of opens the door of being like, well, if it's different for all individuals, wouldn't it work for some people? And I guess a question that I would have is, work in what way? Why is intermittent fasting being used in the first place? A lot of the lines and questioning just doesn't add up. And usually people are like, well, intermittent fasting works for me because it helps me keep the weight off. What does that mean? If your body's fighting always to have that weight back on, like maybe that is best for you. But again, intermittent fasting just doesn't seem like a necessary tool to me. And it can be a very dangerous one as well. And I think intermittent fasting is not only aided by diet culture and this potential promise of weight loss, but the hustle mentality and like productive mentality that a lot of society within North America especially has definitely helps this idea of intermittent fasting too, of like, oh, like I don't have to worry about eating breakfast in the morning. I can go straight into work because I intermittent fast. Maybe we would be more productive, or maybe we would do better at our jobs if we actually had some fuel in the tank, but I digress. Let's talk about the history of fasting a little bit. Of course, this video could be hours and hours long if I were to go through the entire history of fasting, but I think just having like a very brief dip our toes in the water kind of vibe when it comes to the history is important. So fasting is an ancient tradition that has been practiced by many different cultures, many different religions for a very, very long time all across the world. And when somebody expresses their spirituality, for example, or their religion through the act of fasting, I think that that is a very valid reason, especially if it's important to said individual. However, this statement, right, that fasting can align with somebody's spiritual journey or religious journey and is kind of, you know, good and good for them, it can also coexist with other kinds of statements. And another statement that can be made is fasting now in 2022 is not what it used to be or was in the past. And it also doesn't have the same implications that it did have centuries ago. We are a different society in the 21st century with ever-changing and harmful beauty standards and other things that play a huge role in our consumption, in our bodies, in the way we view ourselves and our society is globalization and also capitalism, which has changed significantly in the past couple hundred years. So if you are ever considering fasting for other reasons other than weight loss, so if it stems from religious purposes, spiritual purposes, things like that, please reflect on your true motives. If weight loss is really not on your radar and it's just for you to get closer to your God or whatever it might be, then I think that, again, that could be a valid reason as long as that's your intention, right? But if your motive has anything to do with weight loss, if you hope that you lose a couple of pounds or whatever it might be, you're probably doing it for the wrong reason. Another question to ask yourself is, do you have a history with disordered eating? Does anyone in your family have a history with disordered eating? This can definitely play a role in your decision making when it comes to fasting in the first place. This is not me promoting fasting. This is me understanding that there are multiple sides to like a coin, basically, and that it's not all rooted in evil. And I don't want anybody who fasts for religious reasons or whatever it might be to watch this video and second guess everything that they're doing, because fasting is something that you really have to consider the risks that come along with it. You have to see what your intention is, and you also have to ask if the outcome is worth the potential risk that comes with it. Perhaps your answer is yes, that you have struggled with disordered eating, that it is genetic and somebody in your family used to struggle, that yes, part of you is hoping for a little bit of weight loss. If you answer yes to any of those questions, then perhaps exploring other ways that you can dive into your spiritual journey or your connection with your community or God's would be a good avenue to go down to see if not only you can be accommodated, but also if there's just other things that you can do to feel more connected. Anyway, now that we kind of went over some valid reasons, let's talk about the much more popular category, which is the bullshit reasons. So for me, when it comes to intermittent fasting, two of the most popular reasons that I see people dive into it, the first one is for the hopes of weight loss, and the second reason is to be more productive, to think about food less throughout the day, yada, yada, yada. So we have these two sides to another coin. So increased productivity is a core value in like a capitalist mindset, right? To work, to grind, to work, 7 days a week, 24/7, to be the best version of yourself, right? To make sure you work out every day and drink a specific amount of water every day or whatever it might be. And yes, like it's important to move our body in a way that feels good if it's something that is healthy for us to do at that moment. It's good to appreciate the time that you have throughout the day as well. But this idea of no breaks, no sleep, grind yourself or work yourself to the bone or to where you're feeling super stressed or overwhelmed, no guilty pleasures, all of this just seems so overwhelming. And it also feels like you'd just be like rushing through life, like not taking time to slow down, not taking time to recharge, to rest, This mindset is harmful, but it's also lucrative when it comes to people making money off of you. And since 2019, so quite recently, intermittent fasting has received so many celebrity endorsements as well as public interest. And many of the new investors are interested in making this diet mainstream, at least more mainstream than it is already. So Silicon Valley, which is located in California, has some of the wealthiest people that live there. And many of them want to endorse this fad diet or diet trend. So let's talk a little bit more about what the heck's going on in Silicon Valley. So to a lot of big corporations and people who make a lot of money, saving time equals making more money. So if you are spending less time on your lunch break, less time in the morning eating breakfast, if work doesn't have to cater certain things for its employees, it saves money for big corporations, as well as like pushing this idea of productivity on workers to work all day and like not take breaks. Yes, it's crazy. And so Silicon Valley executives have been trying to push their employees towards intermittent fasting since 2018. They've been trying and trying and trying. And we see a lot of celebrities or people who think they're celebrities tweeting about intermittent fasting, talking about it. The CEO of Twitter, who like I had no idea who it was, his name is Jack Dorsey. He tweeted that he doesn't eat for 22 hours of the day because it makes him more productive. Bitch, where? Like if I don't have a snack, if I don't have a meal, I'm not gonna be more productive. And most people also aren't gonna be more productive. They're probably gonna be thinking about food all the time, dreaming about their next meal. Like you're so distracted by hunger, so distracted. And within Silicon Valley, this is sort of called biohacking, which is a term that is used all over the place. And honestly, I should talk about biohacking in like a separate video because shit is crazy. Like you can't make this shit up. But what biohacking is essentially training the body or training your body to need less food. There's different forms of biohacking as well. Like biohacking doesn't equal just this definition of like training your body to eat less food. It's really about changing the natural rhythm, needs, shape, form, blueprint of your body. It's very unnatural, which is why I believe it's called biohacking, because you're hacking something, right? Like you're not supposed to do this, you're not supposed to be there. Like that's what hackers are, right? They're invasive. They come into a place where they're not welcome. And like you name something after that and you think, yeah, people should want to do this. It's a bit weird to me, but okay. Anyway, apparently if you eat less food, you spend less money, you're able to work more, make more money, yada, yada, yada. And biohacking has become a bit like a cult-like mindset. And we see this a lot of the time with huge corporations and also mainly in the US, where biohacking is encouraged between CEO, employer, exec, and their employees. And I think that so many millennials and Gen Zs are stuck in this like hustle culture because one, shit is so expensive now. Like you need to be raking in the money to be able to afford much of anything. And there's so much pressure to constantly be doing something, to constantly be better than your neighbor, to be better than your friends. And I hate this mentality that if you're not where your friend is, then you're behind in life. And that's just not true. Everyone has a different blueprint in life. And if everyone did everything at the same time all the time, life would be pretty boring. If everyone got married at the same age, if everyone bought their house at the same age, if everyone found their dream career at the same age, it would just be boring. And we don't need boring, okay? We don't need that. So within the tech industry, where biohacking is extremely common, as well as intermittent fasting, a lot of these tech industries, and again, we're sticking more with North America, they hire a very young workforce. And they hire people who are already burned out, whether they are burnt out from school, from tackling like work with another job to afford rent or whatever it might be. A lot of people are already burnt out as is, without intermittent fasting, without removing their fuel and their source of energy, without altering any of that. People are already burnt out. They're already stressed. And now we're going to add this in the mix, and you have employers just trying to like convince you to intermittent fast or to work more and take less breaks or whatever. There's so many problems that go into this way of thinking. Another thing to consider when it comes to like the tech industry's involvement in intermittent fasting as well as in diets is to understand that they have a lot steak. The tech industry, which is already like, it's such a rich industry, has so much money invested in diets, dieting products, dieting books, weight loss programs, weight loss ads and apps and things like that. They've got the money in there. And Silicon Valley is actually quite well known, and they've been fairly criticized for endorsing dehumanizing practices and work-life balance when it comes to their employees. And this is just a reminder to everybody that you're not a fucking robot. I know so many of us think that we have to be robots, that we have to be productive all the time, that we have to be doing something. And this is because of hustle culture. This is because of the grind culture. And part of this also falls into diet culture, that being productive makes you a better person, that thin people tend to be more productive. This is not true, but in our minds, we've like put these puzzle pieces that like don't belong together, and we've just made them fit, but they were never meant to be in the same puzzle in the first place. Anyway, let's talk about what I really want to get into is what can happen to that beautiful body of yours if we begin fasting, if we begin intermittent fasting, all of that stuff. So many of these side effects are actually very similar to the side effects that I spoke about in the keto video. And that's because your body is going into starvation mode when you are fasting. It's desperate, it doesn't know what's going on. This is a reminder that your mind and body are separate. So if you aren't feeding your body, even though logically your mind knows that you have a bunch of access to food, you have food in your pantry, that you can walk down the street and go and get food, your body doesn't understand. It doesn't understand, and it thinks that maybe you're at war, maybe you're being held in somebody's basement, maybe we can't afford food. It doesn't know, and it's going to begin to panic. So that's one of the things to keep in mind, is that you'll most likely end up binge eating or binging to some degree. So some other side effects, again, we're looping in most of the side effects from the last time, but let's read from this list. We have difficulty falling asleep or difficulty staying asleep. We have intense hunger, intense cravings, headaches, dizziness, nausea, constipation, diarrhea, irritability, low blood sugar, fatigue, bad breath. The list kind of goes on and on. And it's also really important to note that skipping meals or severely limiting your calorie intake is extremely dangerous for all individuals, but especially people with certain conditions. And an example of that is diabetes. People who take any medication for blood pressure or heart disease or anything like that, they may be more prone to electrolyte abnormalities when fasting. And let me say this again, there's no strong evidence, zero strong evidence that fasting adds to the health of an individual. There we go. It does not add to your health. So what the fuck is the point? But let's keep going. And as I mentioned, one of the big risks for intermittent fasting is not having that connection with your body and literally severing it completely. If your body is inputting information out and it's saying, I'm hungry, and you ignore it, your mind is ignoring it because it's not time to eat, your body over time is going to learn that you don't respond to its needs. And so you know what it's going to do is it's going to stop putting them out there, at least on a consistent basis. That doesn't mean you'll never feel hungry, but what that does mean is when you're hungry, you're not going to feel it as much, and then you won't respond to the need that your body has in the first place, which is dangerous. It is dangerous. People are getting way ahead of the evidence, and it ruins the opportunity to just be intuitive about your needs, be intuitive about health, and actually be healthy in the first place. Intermittent fasting doesn't promote health. You are not better than somebody because you intermittent fast and the other people don't. You are not healthier than them either. Intermittent fasting, or how long you fast, is not a measure of health. Depriving yourself from food for long periods of time also increases your stress. And as we mentioned, it disrupts your sleep and it increases our anxiety, and there are potential risks for depression as well. This doesn't sound healthy. None of the risks sound healthy either. And the trend of intermittent fasting is especially risky. And one of the main reasons why I'm talking about it on my channel is because I know a lot of my viewers, a lot of my beautiful friends have either suffered from disordered eating, are currently suffering, know somebody who suffers, and this is a huge fucking red flag that you are still deep in diet culture. If you are practicing any intermittent fasting, then you are still practicing something that is disordered, or at least like on the cusp of another eating disorder. Intermittent fasting hides restrictive behaviors. It masks them and pretends that they are something else. And when we have more stress, there's a hormone that we have, which is called cortisol, which usually increases. And when our cortisol increases, our hunger also increases. So not only will you be more stressed, but you're probably also going to feel a lot hungrier and be more frustrated with yourself, and also perhaps frustrated at your body for feeling the way it does. The same biochemistry that regulates your mood also regulates your appetite with nutrient consumption, which can affect your neurotransmitters, right? And that can affect your dopamine, your serotonin, which again leads us back to what I mentioned before, which is why intermittent fasting can potentially lead to depression or increased anxiety. So I really want you to consider all of these risks. Think about the strain you'd be putting not only on your physical health, but your mental health as well. And not only your mental and physical health, but think of your social life. Like imagine being invited out to brunch and saying, oh, I can't go because it's not time for me to eat then. Like, no. Intermittent fasting would take away from so many opportunities. It would take away from, late night snacks with your friends, or a late night slice of pizza, some hot cocoa on like a cold winter morning, and it takes away opportunity instead of giving it to you. Okay, and say you do decide to still do these activities, right? Still go to brunch, whatever it might be, and you don't order anything, you just sit there. One, you're putting your body through this mental torture of like seeing other people eat and enjoy food and telling you that you can't have it. And again, I don't care what your mental headspace is, your body clearly doesn't like to be put in that situation. Or you might go and you might find out that you have a heck of a lot less energy than you used to. Maybe you can't entertain the conversation as long as you could have. Maybe you can't go out for a couple of hours and you only last 30 minutes until you've got to go home. There's a lot of social consequences to intermittent fasting as well. Life is about being flexible. And fasting can be this perfect gateway to disordered eating, or to begin a disordered relationship with food. And even people within the fasting community are competitive with each other. Not even with people who aren't fasting. They try to be like the superior one with another. Oh, you do 16:8, I do 24. Like it's ridiculous, and I've seen these conversations happen in real life. It's not just made up. I'm not pulling this out of my ass. I saw these conversations in the gym all the time. All the time. Heck, I probably used to participate in them when I was very sick myself. Fasting is not admirable, and I will never pat somebody on the back for fasting because I don't think it's something that should be celebrated. So this is just a sign to you, to the viewer. If you have fasted in the past, maybe this video gives you a bit of clarification of why you will never reach for that again in the future. If you have fasted and you're not anymore, think of the reasons why you're not. Think of how you felt when you were fasting. And there's a lot to consider. There's a long list of negative side effects. There's the link in the Silicon Valley. There's the harm that it can do to your social life, the fact that it can potentially lead to disordered eating. There's so many reasons not to do it, and there's so like little valid scientific reasons to do it. Again, the science is not there, so don't jump ahead of the science. Don't do it because your favorite influencer does it. Don't do it in the hopes of just losing weight, whatever it might be. Take care of yourself. Treat yourself like a person, not like a robot. You should not try to increase your productivity at the expense of your nutrition. If you are unhappy with yourself and you think losing weight or, a bit of weight loss is gonna make you feel better, it's not. What do you think comes with the weight loss? Do you think you'll be happier? Do you think you'll be more productive? Do you think people will like you more? Do you think you'll finally get a partner? Do you think you'll get a new job promotion? What do you think is going to come with it? That is the root of the issue you have to work through, okay? And there's so many people in my comments of like, oh no, I'm just trying to lose weight so that I can run more or work on my mobility or my flexibility or run around and play with my kids. Great, do those things, but why bring weight into the equation? If you want to work on stamina, work on stamina. If you want to work on strength, work on strength. Because somebody can work on those things and remain the same weights and actually be able to maybe run further, play with their kids for longer, take their dogs on more walks, whatever it might be. And if that happens without a weight change, does that mean that they didn't improve their health? Think about it a little bit more, okay? For a lot of your life, you've been spoon-fed diet culture lies, and I'm here to try to shed light to some of them. So, that was the truth about intermittent fasting. I feel like I'm always very rambly in these videos because like I get heated and I go on these tangents, but I really hope that you still got something from it, some valuable information to kind of move forward with. And like the last time, I'm always taking suggestions for videos that you would like to see or topics you would like me to talk about, especially in the Truth About series, or just other series that you have like in mind, or recommendations or video requests, anything like that. But thank you so much for watching. If you like videos like this, make sure to give me a big thumbs up, and you can also leave me a kind comment down below if you'd like. Make sure to do something kind for yourself today, okay? Okay. Bye, friends.